Who could have imagined that 10 years later, our industry would be so wildly engaged? Let me just say that you have kicked this thing's ass. And I'm so proud of you and to be associated with such an incredible group of creative, iconoclastic, and fearless folks. All along the way, people said that this was risky, a fad. Only die-hard beer drinkers would still be interested after a few years. And yet here we are. Fueled by sheer passion for our craft, we ignored the short-sighted and the doubters. In fact, we turned it up. More beer weeks, more beer dinners, more boutique distributors, more collaborations, more saying yes. We didn't start out by saying, how do we put together a business plan for the bank? We said, what are the first beers that we're going to brew? We didn't do feasibility studies. We mortgaged our homes and signed personal guarantees. For us, brewing beer is more than a random career choice. It's a lifestyle. And these last 10 years have been unbelievably satisfying. Today, I'm going to wander through the past to the present to the future, picking up themes from that speech 10 years ago to see where we've come to and to think big about the kind of future that we can create for ourselves. It surprised me during this writing process how helpful it was for me to sit down and set aside time to think about the big picture in this way. I'm slow at it, so it's a labor of love, and I hope that this is helpful for you too. The first thing I'd like to do, though, is to set some context. The overarching premise now, as it was 10 years ago and will be forevermore, is that we are a collective. Yes, we each have our own gigs that are uniquely informed by our brewery-specific vibe and focus and culture. But we also own a brand together called American Craft Brewers. And everything, I mean everything, that we each do individually rolls up to that one fundamental and important truth. My second premise, and I think we've proved its validity over the last 10 years, even if unconsciously, is that a shared, I won't call it a vision because I think that's too organized for our ethos, but a shared sense of the territory and the map of where we're going can be a subtle reminder, a powerful push, and certainly a galvanizing force which guides us along the way. So as I go through all of these points today, that's the premise with which I've started my thinking. And the questions I asked are these. While we're continuously working toward being excellent at this ancient craft of brewing, how do we make sure that we are sustainable for the long run? What is it that we want to grow? How do we individually and collectively do the coolest, most intellectually interesting and soul-satisfying thing that we can? That's a big deal, but I find that expression of who we want to be into the future totally engaging. And we have such a great start. Whether it's a vision of how we want to show up in the world as a craft brewery or specific practices that each of us have, we're built on a platform of loving what we do and saying yes to jumping off the edge to possibility. And by being intentional and intriguing, we'll continue to grow our breweries and our collective brand, and we'll continue to be dynamic and relevant in the marketplace. Brewery Vivant in Western Michigan is in its 3rd year, and they've published a sustainability report for their first 2 years of being in business. I think that's really impressive. Not only are they working to reduce their natural resource consumption and increase the positive effects that they can have in their community, they're publishing their goals as a way to be transparent with their customers and with their peers. In 2012, Brewery Vivant decreased their water-to-beer ratio by 34%, and their goal is to continue to push on that front. Their brewery, housed in a building that was formerly a funeral home, has been retrofitted to be LEED Silver. They chose this building because of their desire to be integrated within the Grand Rapids community. Standing Stone Brewery in Ashland, Oregon, leases 260 acres from the city to grow much of the food that they sell in their restaurant. The newly formed 13-member New York City Brewers Guild came together to do a fundraiser for victims of Superstorm Sandy, and they raised more than $10,000. Why does it matter that we do this interesting work? Because that's how beer drinkers will find us intriguing. They're rooting for us, not only because we make the most delicious and innovative beers in the world, but because they love our stories and they love the energy with which we show up in an otherwise often less than distinctive beer and business culture. Beer drinkers love us because we're a friendly and collaborative bunch, and because we've dared to fearlessly strike out on our own adventures, because we've broken the expected norms and sometimes feel constraining. If beer drinking is 10 minutes of pleasure in every bottle, as Peter said, then being associated with this movement as an enthusiast is a lifetime of pure bliss. And when beer drinkers find us intriguing, journalists and writers do too, and distributors and bankers. It's a virtuous cycle over which we have some control. And I want us to make sure that we never take that for granted. I want to talk about being intentional first today. When I spoke in 2003, I talked a lot about the quality of our beers. We all know that it's table stakes, and I think we've collectively worked very hard and we've come very far. I'm always impressed by our creativity and our technical skill when I'm traveling and when I'm tasting at the GABF. And I think that there is still more to be done. As more of us ship beers further away from our brewery, shelf stability becomes a pressing issue. We're a bigger portion of the space allocated on both the warm and cold shelves at retail. Given that we as a segment of the beer industry are growing at 12, 13, and 15% respectively in the last 3 years, or 240% in the last 10, I'm not sure why we're described as over-indexed. We're the best thing that's happened to this industry since the repeal of Prohibition. And at the same time, we need to be absolutely vigilant about how our beers ultimately look, smell, and taste when they get to our customers' lips. Are you investing in field quality, training your salespeople about how to check for your quality standards? Do you understand how your beers hold up, both in optimal and suboptimal conditions? And are you managing your sales accordingly? When you're out in the market, are you checking on rotation and best buy dates? Do you have a best buy date that doesn't require a secret decoder ring? I love the Enjoy by double IPA concept that Stone recently introduced. And Greg and Steve, if you're out there, I wish that had been my idea. And I know that Vinny and Natalie of Russian River exhort beer drinkers to drink Pliny when it's fresh and not to store it. Hoppy beers are perishable. Malty beers below a certain alcohol threshold are perishable. Beer is generally best drunk fresh. But somehow customers seem to believe that laying down a beer will make for a very interesting future tasting. And while that's certainly true for Bretta beers and also some strong ABV beers and the occasional sour or wood beer, the vast majority of beers that we make don't do well with excessive aging. And even more important, they don't do well with sitting warm on a display or on the warm shelf or even in a cooler or warehouse for a long period of time. I worry about this one because beer drinkers will eventually turn away and retailers will second-guess their decision to bring in so many of our beers if they degrade to the point of being unstable. Our collective brand feels the impact of these kinds of issues. Of course, there will be people who say that it's easy for me to say that because we're a bigger brewery. But we've been auditing the marketplace and championing quality standards with our distributors and retailers since we were a very little brewery. And we don't always hit the mark, and all of us have to try. The state of draft quality has become an even bigger dynamic. We're a big proportional percentage of the beer that's served in the on-premise. I thought it was 40, but it sounds like today it's more than 50% of the beer that is sold in restaurants and bars comes from craft brewers, compared to about 16% for the big multinational brewers. And we've come a long way, in large measure, through collaborative effort, which was organized and championed by the BA staff and board to create the Draft Beer Quality Manual. Big props to Ken Grossman, Chris Swersey, and Matt Meadows for their tireless leadership on this front. And back to that virtuous cycle. Beer drinkers are more educated than ever, and they've turned craft beer into a burgeoning phenomenon as they seek out specialty beer bars, where beer culture is honored, and a new identity has been created, not like wine, but wholly unique and different from mainstream lagers as well. Neither pretentious nor frat boy. These beer drinkers have been our partners in setting the expectation for top-notch beer culture. Beautifully executed bars have sprung up across the land in answer to their call. But we have 13 states that don't allow distributors to clean lines. How can we possibly ensure draft beer quality if we don't have a way to hold anyone accountable? Chris Swersey and I were emailing about this a couple of weeks ago, and he had an interesting point. We have momentum now. We have influence now. We need to leverage that now. As I said, the BA has been instrumental in this effort. Of course, everyone believes in draft beer quality, but what are we actually doing about it? What kinds of things can you do to encourage your distributors? What is your training for your lab staff and your salespeople? How can you influence your legislators? Beer drinkers are counting on us to be the guardians of quality, and what we achieve here matters. We have another task to master to become more intentional as a community of brewers. Thank you so much, and congratulations to all of you who showed up for our Capitol Hill climb yesterday. The BA board and staff have dreamed of the day when we would gather our tribe and go speak with our legislators. 230 craft brewers went to the Hill yesterday to be our industry's face and voice. In the past, many of us went to the Hill as a part of the NBWA Legislative Conference. NBWA has been very generous to invite us to join them each year, and still, we knew that we needed to speak for ourselves. We did that just yesterday, and I have the feeling that Capitol Hill will never forget.